The following segment comes from my most popular breakout on communication skills. Relate and communicate, building bridges and connecting with others. For those who can earn continuing education credits or professional development units, this is part of my 24-hour leadership development program. If you do all the exercises, most people have been able to self-report 4 or more hours. Let's get started. When you look at this picture, you see that the head to the right is a rabbit and the one to the left is a duck. During a live session, I'll ask the audience, if you see one image and I see the other, am I wrong? Of course, the answer is no. But how many times do people look at the same problem, and when the other person does not approach things the way that you do, the miscommunication begins? Well, that's one of the things we want to overcome. And your ability to recognize strengths, blind spots, and weaknesses is going to help. This all starts with your self-awareness. Communication skills are important in every line of work. And since I'm in the business of leadership development, I consider self-awareness a leadership fundamental. Understanding communication styles is just one of 3 assessments I offer to help leaders increase their self-awareness. In this session, we're going to leverage the DISC Index assessment. And whether you take the assessment and get your full report, or you choose to proceed with an unscientific approach, you'll still be able to apply the principles we are about to cover. Our objectives here are to identify your communication style, understand the 4 styles, and learn how to identify the styles in others. Before we get rolling, in the email where you received this video link, I also gave you access to other content. A single sheet of terms to help you determine your communication style, an ebook and tip sheets, and also a PDF of these slides. If you don't have these handy and you want to take notes, you might want to hit pause and continue again when you're ready. The skills curve says that when you enter an organization at the individual contributor level, 90% of your success depends on your technical skills, and only 10% your people skills. But as soon as you get promoted to manager, now your success depends upon 50% people and 50% technical skills. It's where the biggest change occurs. Middle management, 75% people skills. Top management, 90%. Your reasons for success are completely reversed. The donut hole. You get trained on the technical skills before you arrive, and if you're in top management, you'll get leadership training. And if you're lucky, as a middle manager too. But when you need help the most, you are somehow expected to learn leadership on your own. Would it shock you if I told you that 40% of new leaders fail within the first 18 months? And 82% of the time, there's a common reason. What do you think that is? Managers underestimate the importance of building relationships. Just in case you're wondering who I am, that's me. And when I do this live, I use this neat tool called Poll Everywhere to get the audience input. And I'm about to show you some charts and wordgrams from another session. The first question I asked that audience, do you think a relationship should be a 50-50 proposition? Here were the responses. 3 out of 5 people thought relationships should be 50-50. And only 1 in 5 thought there needed to be overlap. I promise you, if you go into any relationship with a 50-50 attitude, it will fail. Why? Because we're all human, all prone to error. If you go into any relationship with a 50-50 attitude, your bridge will never form. Your bridge will never form. As a manager, you have to ask yourself, do you want your relationship to work? Of course you do. But that means you need overlap. Not 50-50, 75-75. And as a leader, you have to be the one to initiate. And this takes great self-awareness. Let me ask, if you invited me to your house, and on my way I called you for help with directions, what's the first question you're going to ask me? Where are you, right? Of course. Just like you have to know your start point when it comes to travel, when it comes to building relationships, you have to know who you are. Let's tackle our first subjective. Identify your communication style. You have to answer the two questions. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? And are you people or task oriented? And if you can answer these two questions correctly about yourself and about others, you'll be able to determine not only their communication style, but the correct bridge you need to build. Now let's pull out the handout that I sent you that looks like this. We're going to go through this first exercise step by step. Starting with the first column, identify a word or an adjacent pair if you must, that describes how you tend to approach problems and make decisions. For example, if you select competitive, you'll see the number 56 off the left. At the top of the page, place a 56 under the D. How do you tend to interact with others and share your opinions? The people column. If you chose that you're inspiring, give yourself an 80 and place that under the I. What is your pace, preferred pace and environment? If you prefer a stable environment, you'll choose 64 and you'll place that number under the S. And finally, what's your preference when it comes to procedures and protocols? Do you consider yourself a neat person? If that's the case, 48, put it under the C. And finally, what you're going to do is you're going to circle the top two numbers. And these scores will give you an idea of your preferred tendencies and communication style. While these numbers are not scientific, they will provide you the insight you need for the rest of this segment. Here's an idea of how my audience self-assessed. It's a small data sample, but as we proceed, I'm going to share with you percentages from a much larger data set. Now that you have an idea of your style or your start point, the next thing we have to do is determine the other person's style. And once you know that, you'll know which bridge that you'll need to build. Let's get some better clarity on understanding the four communication styles. And we're going to do this by exploring a favorite quote of mine from Catherine Patterson. The name we give something shapes our attitude toward it. There are a number of psychologists and DISC assessments out there, and every psychologist uses a slightly different set of terms. But when we piece a few of these terms together, we get a better picture of each DISC style. Let's take a look. The original psychologist chose dominance, influencing, submissive, and compliance. A British psychologist uses these terms: drivers, the expressives, the amiables, and the analytical. And for the DISC index, we use these terms: decisive, interactive, stability, and cautious. Now, when you group these terms, you can get a better idea and a clearer picture of what it means to be in each of the four quadrants. The name we give something shapes our attitude toward it. Next, let's focus on the two questions about the other person to determine style. Let's split this north-south. In the north, the D's and the I's, those are the extroverts of the world. And in the south, the S's and the C's, those are the introverts. Take a look at this east and west. Off the left, the task-oriented folks, the D's and C's. And off the right, the people-oriented folks are the I's and the S's. Again, piece it all together, and you can start answering those two questions and place people in a quadrant. So what else can we use to assist us? Earlier, I shared with you my data sample. Now, here are percentages Not from hundreds or thousands, but hundreds of thousands of people taking these assessments. A statistically valid data sample. 10% of the population are Ds, 25% are Is, 45% are S's, and 20% are C's. Now, if we do the math, 35% of the population are extroverted, and 65% are introverts. Probably not what you think, but again, statistically valid. Hundreds of thousands of people have taken these assessments. Next, only 30% of the population is task-oriented, while 70% are people-oriented. If you have to guess another person's style, make it an educated guess and use these statistics. So there you have it. Our next question. For each quadrant, what are the typical roles these people have? Here's what my audience thought. They thought extroverted, task-oriented folks are leaders and managers. Extroverted and people-oriented tend to be in sales and marketing. People-oriented, introverted, HR, customer service. And introverted and task-oriented, people who like to work with numbers, right? STEM, science, technology, engineering, and manufacturing. So here's the full picture. Gives us a clearer idea, doesn't it? Next, your next step is to decide, well, what term are you going to use to define the roles for each of these quadrants? Here are the terms I used. Yours may be different. Directors, sales, customer service, and finance technical. That helps me get a clearer idea of each quadrant. The next question. Where do they place their focus or direct their attention? Here are the entries I received this time. They felt that the D's focused on the big picture or strategy. The I's, people, communication. The S's, people, but more in a support, listening, helping type of role. And finally, the C's, they like to focus on details and numbers. Once again, here's the full picture. And I'll share with you my terms. I chose goals, transactions, relationships, and tasks. And each of the terms are slightly different to help me distinguish some of those discrepancies, if you will, that would separate one quadrant from another. Here's the full roll-up. Let's do a quick review of what we have so far. We've talked about identifying the styles and understanding the 4 styles. One of the things I want to share with you is, where do you think the greatest difference would be? Between which quadrants? Well, the diagonals, of course. The D's are extroverted and task-oriented, while the S's are people-oriented and introverted. Similarly, I's, extroverted and people-oriented, and the C's are introverted and task-oriented. In order to build relationships, first we have to determine our style and then the other person's style so that we know the correct bridge that we need to build. Now, let's take a look at some examples of bridges that need to be built. Let's consider the I and the C and their relationship with the D. Both of them will take a different path or build a different bridge. Similarly, if they're communicating with an S, again, it's a different bridge they need to build. And all of this involves great self-awareness on our part. Let's go a little deeper now. Think back to driver's education. You were taught to turn your head both ways to ensure that you saw the cars, motorcycles, and most important, pedestrians. Certainly, when I was learning to fly, we were taught to keep our heads on a swivel and constantly turn our heads. Why? Well, remember biology? You see, Where the optic nerve attaches to the back of the retina, there are no rods and cones, or light receptors, the things that tell the brain what we're seeing. And because there are no rods and cones at that point, at that attachment, we have a natural blind spot, 45 degrees off of our left front and 45 degrees off of our right front. Being aware of this is important because it tells us and gives us the information to take the necessary corrective action. Here's a side note. In a live session, I'll ask the audience, what's the difference between a blind spot and a weakness? My response is, a blind spot, again, is something we're aware of. We can take the corrective action. A weakness is something we're not aware of. Or maybe it is something we're aware of, but we just choose to ignore it. Now let's take a look at some blind spots when it comes to communication styles. Should you take the DISC Index assessment, one of the pages in your report will be what I call the kite chart. It looks like this. And you see that square in the middle? If your kite chart covers that square, your blind spot is minimal, like this D. This person's blind spot was with people-oriented individuals. Now let's take a look at this I. Blind spot on the opposite quadrant, the C's. This S, a much greater blind spot with the D's. And this C, a similar blind spot also with the D's. Again, it all starts with self-awareness. And the DISC Index is the only DISC assessment that I'm aware of that measures both your natural and your adaptive styles. The colored bars are your natural style. The gray bars are your adaptive. We all have a preferred style. And then we have the style that we exhibit when we're at work or when our actions are being observed. Now the key point here is when there's a difference in the scores between natural and adaptive of 30 or more, maybe you're trying to be somebody who you're not, and this is causing you some great stress. Let's move on to our last objective. Practicing identifying other styles. I gave you these tip sheets, and we're going to use them from this day forward to help you understand and learn styles. At first, this is going to require some conscious effort on your part. And then when you practice enough and you start noticing these signals to help you answer the two questions, it'll become part of your subconscious. Here's the first one. Introvert or extrovert? Let's assume you are assessing that for me during this session. And we're just going to look at one of these 10. Voice intonation. Is my intonation less or more inflection? Does it have, I should say. You're going to make your decision. You're going to put a tick mark on the appropriate side. Then you're going to go through the other 9 variables. And when you're done, you're going to tally them all up. And you're going to assess, based on the score, that you think I'm an introvert or an extrovert. Same thing with whether you're task-oriented or people-oriented. If we were to go with the getting to know, well, this is probably going to be very difficult for you to do in this video, but this is ideally done with someone that you're meeting face-to-face or somebody you know. Is that person hard to get to know, or easy to get to know? Again, like the previous example, you're going to go through these 9 variables, place your tick marks where you feel is appropriate, and make a decision on this question. Now that you've answered introvert or extrovert, people or task-oriented, you can place that individual in one of 4 quadrants. You'll have assessed the other person's style. You'll know which type of bridge you need and want to build. Again, it's like riding a bike. You'll have to practice this some first. And eventually, this will move from a conscious effort to a subconscious habit. Over time, you'll get better at recognizing styles. You'll get better at building relationships and connecting with the members in your team. And you'll be able to relate and communicate better with anyone you meet. I hope you found this segment helpful. If you'd like to learn more about leadership development services that I offer, please take a look at my website, blackhawkspeaks.com. You'll find the free training session you just took part in right here at the homepage. You'll find my speaking and coaching, as well as more about me, my blog, and the contact information in the upper right. And if you're ready to learn more about how to succeed as a servant leader, please click the contact button, and right over here, go ahead and schedule a 30-minute complimentary call. I'd be happy to talk to you. Thank you very much. Wishing you all my best on your leadership journey.